and Earl is Pearl. And Earl had it. As soon as she
We're glad that you have come together this morning to receive blessings from God and from each other and from our messenger today, who is Tim Morphew, who lives in Goshen and is a retired Church of the Brethren pastor. I am Marie Willoughby, your host this morning, and we want to thank Becky Cordes for the beautiful prelude and Tim Ritchie Martin for doing our lights and sound this morning and the camera. That's the important part here. We're going to sing before Tim speaks to us, number 546 in the blue hymnal, 546, all verses of Guide My Feet. And you'll notice verse 6 is the same as verse 1.
Thank you, Becky and Marie. I want to share with you a scripture that many will be familiar to many of you from the Emmaus Road experience of the two disciples on the afternoon of the first Easter. It's Luke 24, beginning in verse 13. And because it's long, I'm going to summarize a little bit and trust that you trust me to be summarizing pretty accurately. This is Easter Day. That very day, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What is this conversation which you are holding with each other as you talk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it's now the third day since this happened. Moreover, some women from our company amazed us." And he goes on to explain how the women have been witnesses, and the disciples, of course, didn't believe him, so they went to look, and sure enough, it was just like the women said. And the stranger responds, "Oh, foolish men and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them all the scriptures and the things concerning themselves. So they drew near to the village to which they were going, and he appeared to be going further, but they urged him to saying, "Stay with us, for the day is now far spent." And he went in to stay with them, and when he was at table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished out of their sight. And they said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, and while he opened the scriptures to us?" And they rushed back then to Jerusalem, however far it is, 7 miles back to Jerusalem, to find the other disciples gathered together, who said, "The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. Some of you know that I'm a walker and a kind of a hiker, and having completed the Appalachian Trail, I was looking for a kind of a new challenge. I had heard some things about the Camino de Santiago, a sacred route, actually a whole network of sacred routes that go to the Cathedral of St. James in Santiago, Spain. I mentioned that to Betty Kelsey, and she shared with me her book, Walk in a Relaxed Manner, Life Lessons from the Camino by Joyce Rupp. And that led me to read a bunch of others. And so about last year, about this time, I was reading lots of books about the Camino, and with the indulgence of Beth Sollenberger, my wife, and her support, I planned to do that and did so last September. And I share that with you because I would say that some of my experiences on the Camino resonate with what goes on between the disciples and this stranger that joins them. When I talk about my hikes or pilgrimage, some people ask, "Did you go alone? Are you going alone?" The short answer is yes. Most times I have started out by myself, but I have never been completely alone on any walk that I have taken. Every day, and especially on the Camino, which is a very popular pilgrimage route, I saw a number of other walkers. I passed them by, or they passed me by. Usually we greeted each other, as is the tradition, "Buen Camino." And sometimes we talked for a while. I met a lot of people along the way: Priscilla from Vermont, Andrew and Julie from Australia, Charity from California, Reiner from Maine, Gertrude and Pierce from Ireland and from Pennsylvania, as she described it. Shangun Lee and Hung Soo Ko, a couple from South Korea who became dear to me. And Pepe from Spain, who was doing his 5th Camino pilgrimage and often rescued me as we were trying to get registered into a hotel or a refuge, an albergue or something in the evening, because my Spanish is not so hot. It seems that something about walking on the Camino makes it easier to talk. Something about sharing the same path and the same destination established a deeper trust, which made it easy to talk and to even open up a little more deeply than you might open up standing in line at McDonald's, for instance. It's pretty much assumed, I guess, if you're walking the Camino, that you're doing it for some reason. So it was natural to ask or to be asked, so why are you walking the Camino? After all, everybody has to have a reason, right? A person doesn't walk 480 miles across the country of Spain by accident. No, to get to Santiago, you have to get up every day and get yourself dressed, put on your backpack, go out the door, get on the path, and walk and walk and walk and walk. And I would suppose that there are as many reasons, as many answers to that question as there are people, or more, some of us having more than one reason for doing it. An act of penance, an act of love and devotion, an act of gratitude, or to be processing some loss or grief, as our friends on the Emmaus Road seem to be doing. When Justin from Texas found out I was a retired pastor, he told me he had just broken up with his longtime girlfriend. It seemed to have taken him by surprise. He thought he knew where his life was going, but their separation had stunned and wounded him. He didn't know what to do with himself, so he came to walk the Camino. Justin thought maybe he should pray, talk to God about it, but how? What should he say? I think I encouraged him just to say whatever was on his heart, just to say to God what he would say to anybody else, to me, as he was talking with me. I assured him that God already knew what was going on in his life and how he was feeling, but that in talking with God, somehow we find ourselves drawing closer in praying whatever is on his heart every day, whenever, whatever is coming up in his heart and in his meditations. Answers, or perhaps at least ideas, or a nudge in a particular direction might emerge. He thanked me, turned around, and walked back to the place he was staying that night. And as I reflected on that conversation and wondered if I had offered anything helpful at all, it occurred to me that what I had told him was a pretty good reminder to me about my own Camino meditations. The prayer is, as we know, just simply talking with God about whatever's going on, opening up our hearts, offering up our thoughts, holding them in a kind of an ongoing conversation with God until an idea or a nudge or a next step comes to mind. We do not know how to pray as we ought, but the Spirit of God intercedes with us with sighs too deep for words. And in truth, I have usually come back from a long walk or a hike with some ideas about things that I wanted to work on. On my first or second day, while I walked with Priscilla from somewhere in Vermont and I shared with how troubled I am by the deep divides and the angry divisions in our culture and society, the great chasms of difference across which we shout at each other. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but she shared with me her experience in a recent election in her hometown, where the woman recently elected mayor had pursued a more civil campaign and won, which Priscilla took as a hopeful sign that might suggest that people still want to elect folks that will work cooperatively, even with those who differ seriously. Something that often happens in my conversations with God is that I complain about something that I don't like in others. And after a while, enough of this complaining, a voice will come to me that says something like, "And what about you?" Meaning, in what ways do you think and talk and act and do the very things that you hate and condemn in others? So, thus, I began to wonder about my prejudices and my biases and the way I rush to judgment based on what I see in people's on their clothes, the cars they drive, the flags they fly, the signs they post in their yard, the stickers on their bumpers, and so on. And as I followed this Camino path, I came to this kind of discouraging realization that when I'm cruising along without hardly a care in the world, during those rarefied moments, my thoughts and meditations soar. I'm filled with grace and loving feelings towards all the world, and I also remembered in that I have felt that way on good hiking days on every hike I've gone on. Same experience, nearly transcendent moments of love and grace toward family, loved ones, friends, even the folks that irritate me. But when I get home and return to the cares of everyday life, the unhappy, grumpy Tim emerges again. And I find myself feeling impatient and irritable and jumping to conclusions and grumbling at other drivers in front of me and, tapping the horn as soon as the light turns green. One morning, 2/3 of the way into my hike, I got up and started walking before dawn, as was many of our customs because it was cool then. And the stars are beautiful over that part of Spain, and it seems like maybe the air is clearer. And I paused and wondered at the star-studded night sky and thanked God for the beauty of the earth and the sky. After the sun came up, I stopped at one of the many cafes along the way for a cup of coffee and a tortilla, which is like a piece of quiche. The place was busy with people waiting in line to order their coffees and their pastries and their breakfasts. An extended family was there, a couple of them in line in front of me, others elsewhere in the shop looking around at what was for sale. And as the two in the front of, right in front of me got to the counter to place their orders, 3 or 4 other family members joined them to add their orders in. I was not exactly a happy camper. And even as I grumbled to myself, I knew what was happening. My spiritual thoughts and meditations had vanished as any love and grace were displaced by a grumbling spirit. A little like, it seems to me, a little like the way Cleopas answers the stranger's innocent question when he asks, "What are you talking about?" Listen, did you hear the tone of his answer? Are you the only stranger in all of Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days? Does Cleopas sound a little irritated? I think he does. Incredulous at least, and a little irritated. Cleopas, like you and me, imagines that everybody else knows exactly what he knows and sees life exactly as he sees it, that all of Jerusalem was focused on the trial and crucifixion and death of Jesus. And I would propose to you there could very well have been people in Jerusalem for Passover that year who were quite unaware of what Pilate's soldiers were doing over on Golgotha Hill. But Cleopas thinks that everybody in Jerusalem knew or should have known. Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem that does not know the things that have taken place there? Of course, as Cleopas continues to spill out to the stranger the bewildering and heartbreaking experience of the past 3 days, he reveals to the readers like us the limits of his own knowledge. In fact, he points out, if you think about it, the levels of awareness that are going on there and probably in our lives all the time. Awareness is a very vital part, of our life, of our faith, of our spiritual practice. Notice in the Emmaus Road narrative, the levels of awareness that are there. Jesus walks with them, but they don't recognize him. They think the stranger's obtuse not to know what happened in Jerusalem, but the stranger who is Jesus is about to school them in who's really obtuse and who does not grasp the deeper meaning and significance of his life and death. And even after he explains it all to them, they still don't recognize Jesus. Not until they're eating together and he takes the bread and blesses it and breaks it and gives it to them. Then their eyes are open and they recognize him and he vanishes from their sight, which some would suggest that the moment of his vanishing tells us something about the purpose of his appearing. Finally, when Jesus, I said that, since the year 814 or so, for more than 1,200 years, believers have been following the way to the shrine of the Apostle St. James in the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela in Galicia, Spain, where remnants of this apostle are said to be buried. Throughout the medieval period, it was one of the three most important Christian pilgrimages undertaken, and only those three, to Jerusalem, to Rome, or to Santiago, could result in a plenary indulgence for Catholics. From early on in my pastoral ministry, I knew that I couldn't really do anything that was worthwhile or lasting unless it served God's purpose. And so those have been my prayers on all my hikes, and not only on my hikes, actually in the ministry too, that God would lead me and guide me along the way. So as I said, from my first day on the hike, it was my prayer that it would be a walk, a camino toward a deeper awareness, a closer walk with Jesus, like so many others who have walked the Camino de Santiago. It was a spiritual path and a walk seeking spiritual awareness, growth, and depth. Whenever I step out of my routine, whenever I get away on a hike or pilgrimage, I enjoy the solitude and recognize new depths of my brokenness and the things that need to be fixed in me. But whenever I've gone on a long walk, I have also, like those believers on the Emmaus Road, walked and talked with strangers who shared with me a bit of their story as I shared with them. And in the walking, in the talking, in the listening, I learn things. I'm repeatedly reminded that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who suffers with what is wrong in our world or what is wrong in me. I'm not the only one who has hurt badly, who has suffered grievous loss. I'm not alone with my shadows, nor are those dark and hurtful things the last word. Oh no, they are not the last word. They are not the final word. They are certainly not the ultimate word. For some of the strangers who come along and walk a few steps with us are God sent into our lives to walk with us, to encourage us, to offer us a bit of hope, a little good news, a glimpse of the gospel. So at the same place where I stopped for coffee and got irritated by the people who broke in line in front of me, I waited, chided myself about the shallowness of my own, the little veneer of my love and grace, and waited and got my coffee and my tortilla, went outside, sat down, put up my feet, enjoyed my second breakfast, and watched others come and go. And when I got done, I picked up my dirty dishes and took them back inside and left them on the counter, went back to the table, picked up my stuff, got myself ready to go back to the Camino. And as I passed a woman who sat nearby, she looked right at me, looked into my eyes, and said, "Buen Camino." Now, people said "Buen Camino" to each other all the time, but for some reason in that moment, her looking and the way she looked at me reached me, touched me deeply, blessed me. The two believers exclaimed, "Did not our hearts burn within us?" All the woman said was "Buen Camino," and I don't know if it meant anything to her at all at that moment, but it warmed my heart. And as I reflected on it, I realized I can bless people as easily as that, as easily as she blessed me. I can offer a smile, a bit of eye contact, a Buen Camino, or a good day. Almost every day I walked and talked with somebody whose company along the way brought me a moment of human contact, a little bit of kindness, a token of grace. At many pilgrim meals, I sat with other pilgrims as we got acquainted, shared a meal, broke some bread together. It wasn't exactly bread and cup, but it was a kind of a communion as we partook together of the food and the quality of fellowship that feeds your soul. The story of these two believers on the Emmaus Road is a story of walking, talking, listening, and learning. What do they learn? That Jesus is alive and walks with them, that Jesus is there whether they recognize him or not, My Camino experience might not have been as quite as dramatic as those, the experience of those on the Emmaus Road. Yet my message to you is that Jesus is there every day in the people that we walk with, talk with, eat with. And oh, by the way, if we're open to it, somebody might even think that they see Jesus in us. And we accept bread at his table, broken and shared, a living sign. Here in this world, dying and living, we are each other's bread and wine. Amen. Now, sisters and brothers, may God watch over us on our journeys of faith. May God be our companion on the walk, our guide at every crossroad, refreshment in our weariness, protection in danger, refuge from every storm, light in the darkness, and hope in the face of discouragement, so that with God's blessing we arrive safe and sound at the end of the road, and filled with love and grace, return safely home. Amen.